My journey to find the patron saints of Britain and Ireland has so far revealed that St. George is a figure who has real contemporary relevance to multi-faith England today. But what of St. David, the patron saint of Wales, perhaps the lesser known of the four patron saints? David is thought to be a local boy, a homegrown talent. But who was David, and how did he get to the powerful position of patron saint of Wales? To find out, I head for the UK's smallest city, St. Davids, in the farthest corner of Wales. There's less doubt in the minds of historians that David existed, owing to a number of sources that refer to his life, not to mention his legacy. But most of what we know of David is based on the first surviving account of his life written by a priest called Rigavar.
And so it was that this holy man, who was baptized David, but whom the common people called Dewi, became known, not just because he was foretold by the truth-telling prophecies of angels, but also because he was enriched with mystical gifts.
On the outskirts of St. David's, in an exposed part of the coast, are the ruins of St. Non's Chapel, David's birthplace.
According to tradition, David was born here, on this spot, at the beginning of the 6th century, about 510, 520. He was the son of a local king. He was a very studious and devout young man. And right at the end of the 11th century, when the Normans were sweeping across South Wales and obliterating the Celtic Church, Rigavar wrote down all that he could find about St. David.
Now tell me about St. David in terms of his parents, because you just said one of his parents was a local king.
Yes, in a way it's a horror story. Rigavar tells the story of Sanctus, David's father. He was king of Ceredigion, a very powerful man and a very holy man. But for some reason, he met a beautiful young woman called Non. He fell wildly in love with her. When she wouldn't give in to him, he raped her.
He raped her?
He raped her. Here. She became pregnant. And she lived a life of absolute austerity and devotion while she was expecting the child. The child was born here in a thunderstorm. She was an outcast. She had nowhere else to go. There was a stone here, which you used to be able to see, which was supposed to have the marks of her fingernails in, that she dug in during the birth pains.
Why was he born of rape? What is his biographer trying to tell us here? Because this is a brutal saint story. This is, you don't find this anywhere else.
It's
a saint who's born of rape. How can that in any way be devout or a holy experience?
You have to remember that Rigavar is writing at the beginning of the 2nd millennium, when it was a period of reform. It was a time when the church in Rome was becoming increasingly uneasy about human sexuality, about relationships between men and women. It's no longer acceptable to have someone who is holy and married. So the nearest that Non can get to having a child while still a virgin is to have a child as a result of rape. And Rigavar is rewriting the story to take that new perspective on board.
Sounds like Jesus in some ways. Is some kind of play on that?
You've got the story of the old husband and the young wife as well, which is the way that Joseph and Mary were always presented in the Middle Ages. So, yes, a lot of the stories of the Welsh saints do seem to be very clearly modelled on the life of Jesus.
It's not only through an extraordinary birth that David's life mirrors that of Jesus. Rigavar wrote that from an early age, even while inside the womb, David performed many miracles, curing the blind, bringing the dead back to life, and creating freshwater springs on dry, barren land. As Rigavar wrote David's life, he began to spin a great tale. In order for David to be elevated to patron saint of Wales, he was going to need help. Fortunately, he had the writings of Rigavar behind him. And Rigavar, like all great spin doctors, could tell a fantastic story. 80 miles northeast of St. David's is the village of Llandwy Brefi. In the centre of the village, on top of a small hill, is the Church of St. David's, and it marks a crucial moment in David's life story. Jonathan, what happens here in the story of St. David?
Well, the story is that this group of bishops assemble in Llandwy Brefi, And they have, in a sense, a sort of competition where a mound of garments is put upon the ground, and they each speak from this mound. And the one whose voice rings out to the furthest extent of the gathering is the one, in a way, who is most fitted to be, you know, the true bishop of all of the bishops.
So David gets to the synod. What happens next?
He comes in off the road where he's raised the boy from the dead.
Raise the boy from the dead?
Yeah, everyday event, you know. And he gets the boy to put a handkerchief on the ground, and he stands on the handkerchief. And then a dove comes down and settles on his shoulder. And as he preaches, the ground rises up under his feet, and his voice reaches out to all the assembled bishops. And this is the proof, in a way, that he is the one most fit to be the leader of all the bishops. And those symbols, the handkerchief, the ground rising up, and the dove on the shoulder are the really iconic images of David in sort of his popular cult even today.
With the strongest voice in the land, Rigivar made David not just the most important archbishop in what was then Britain, but the leader and protector of his fellow countrymen. So what do you think his biographer is up to here? What's the central message he wants to get across to his audience?
When we consider the time in which Rigivar is writing, at a time when the Normans are moving into Wales, I think there is a claim being made here for the preeminence of St David and St David's over not just Wales, but, if you like, to up the claim a bit, the whole of Britain.
What's the oldest reference we have of David?
The text that people hold up as the earliest reference to St David is this stone in the wall up here, which is upside down now, so you have to sort of reconstruct it, and there's another bit of it up there. It's a memorial stone, so it commemorates a person who has died, and it says, "Here lies Idna, the son of James, who was killed on account of the plundering of St David," presumably the Church of St David.
So what does that then tell us about the cult of David?
Well, what I think it tells you is that already someone being buried and commemorated at Llanddewi Brefi is being commemorated in terms of their affiliation to the cult of St David. In other words, that this is sort of the Church of St David, and this is a follower of St David accordingly.
So it's a very early reference to the fact that people were here and venerating David as a saint.
To these people here, he is Saint David, someone to follow as a saint.
Rigivar claims David travelled throughout the west of Britain, founding churches and monasteries, including Bath, Leominster and Glastonbury. David's last and most important monastic foundation was at St David's, on the site of St David's Cathedral today. When was the cathedral founded, and when was it first associated with St David?
Built 1180, added to in the 16th century. David's association with the site go back about 500 years before that. He came here in order to get away from the world. He came here because it was sheltered. He came here because it was a place where he could build a community, because he didn't come on his own. And to live this exceedingly ascetic life, a fiercely ascetic life. No meat, bread and water, bread and herbs, no possessions, nothing. He expected the monks to do the manual work themselves. No animals, no draft animals, nothing. They put the yoke on their shoulder to draw the plough. They turned the sod with spades.
What else did they do in order to keep themselves pure?
Well, the thing about David is he's always known in Welsh as David the Waterman. And that everybody thinks, you know, he's a teetotaler, he doesn't drink. Well, absolutely true. But what he used to do, he used to go into cold water up to his neck and recite psalms. And there was a sect of them around at the time called the Watermen.
So what impression do you get of David then, given that he lived this kind of life, this austere life of denial? What does that suggest to you?
Well, I have more than once seen it as a life of sustained self-abuse, really, because you're denying, if you like, the gifts of creation.
We are told that David lived to the incredible age of 147, probably dying at the end of the 6th century. The waterman's last words were, "Brothers and sisters, be joyful and hold fast to your faith and belief, and do the little things you heard and saw from me." Devotion to David spread as far as Ireland and northern France. The importance of St. David's as a place of pilgrimage grew, and even English kings came to show their respect to the Welsh waterman. In the 12th century, the Pope declared 2 pilgrimages to St. David's being worth 1 to Rome. So what strengths did this quiet, devout man hold that ensured his position as patron saint?
Major saints founded major churches with a community. And the community, if you like, saw itself as a living embodiment of their saint. They also had the ability, as we did here, of offering sanctuary to people. And certainly in the case of David, we know that in the 11th century, at a difficult time, we gave sanctuary to the King of South Wales, who had been driven out. And the King of South Wales, he's so grateful, he gives us all the land from here to Fishguard. So that's how it starts. That's the royal family. Lots of them are buried here. And obviously, if you've got that behind you, you are a success.
Do you think that David was real? Was he a real historic figure?
Oh, yes. I don't think you could have a church foundation as powerful as this one. I don't think you would have all these legends about him. He crops up in the stories of most of the other Welsh saints. I don't think you would have that out of a fictitious figure. I think he was real.
How does David compare with the other patron saints? You've got George, the dragon slayer. How does David compare?
Yes, and then you've got David, the quiet one.
That's right,
Yes, I mean, he's the learned one, he's the studious one, he's the self-effacing one. And he does all that he does by pulling back. And, I mean, I think this tells us quite a lot about ourselves as Welsh. You know, we're a small nation, we're almost at our best when we're losing. We write wonderful poetry about losing. When we win, we don't really know what to do with it. And I don't know how much of that actually comes.
So David works well then in terms of
Yes.
suiting the national temperament of the Welsh.
Oh, I think so, yes. I mean, we couldn't have a big aggressive saint like St. George. We wouldn't know what to do with him. Just inner strength. I think this, you know, this is a good thing to go for.
It seems to many, David the quiet Christian saint is the right figurehead to represent the Welsh nation. Since the 19th century, the movement to celebrate Welsh cultural identity has made St. David increasingly important in Wales. Devolution put the Saints' Day on the political agenda, but on St. David's Day, his followers are determined to remind people of his religious significance. Watching the Bishop of St. David's bless the world in the saint's name convinces me that David's religious role has survived.
God bless this city, its homes and its people. God bless this diocese, its parishes and its churches. God bless this world, its nations and their leaders. This St. David's Day and always. Amen.
But does David, the Christian saint, really have a contemporary role to play today?
I think the fact that nearly 1/3 visitors visit this tiny little city on the edge of Wales every single year speaks volumes in itself. There is something about the continuity of spirituality that is almost palpable here that really does speak to people today. And so, in many ways, whether you're religious or not, whether you're Christian or not, St. David is someone who represents Wales for everyone.
But to find out what everyday Welsh people know and think of their patron saint, on his day, I head to Cardiff, to the party celebrations in the capital city.
St. David is from Wales. He's hard as nails, St. David, right? He's hard as nails. King George put armour on, right, to fight the dragon. Not David, he wouldn't have done that. He'd have fought him in his speedos. Right?
How much of David's life do these people still remember? Is it the religious significance or the great stories that Rigovar spun?
What do you know about St. David?
Actually, not a lot. I think he was a monk, wasn't he?
His mother was called Non. That's about it, I think.
He put a piece of cloth down, and then he stood on that piece of cloth, and the cloth rose up.
He stood on some ground on the handkerchief on the ground was,
What does St. David mean to you?
Welshness.
Welshness.
Yes.
He was preaching to a load of people and they couldn't hear him. So he put a hanky on the ground and then the ground beneath him grew and grew so that everyone could hear him.
And that's something like whenever he was responsible for a miracle, a freshwater spring appeared. Am I on the right track here?
It's not that we are ashamed, it's just that nobody knows very much about him at all.
The reactions I got from the people of Cardiff told me that David the man and his elaborate legend is strong here. The quiet waterman is still very much a part of the Welsh landscape. Next, I will start my quest to find St. Andrew of Scotland, the patron saint closest to Jesus himself.